April 14th, 2014. Darya Khan Town, Punjab Province, Pakistan. A chilling stench of rotting flesh began to creep through the narrow streets, growing stronger by the minute. Nervous whispers spread among the locals as they traced the putrid smell to a seemingly ordinary house in the neighborhood. But what lay inside was anything but ordinary. The house belonged to two brothers, Muhammad Arif Ali and Muhammad Farman Ali, who lived there with their mentally disabled sister. Fearful of what they might find, the villagers alerted the authorities. When the police arrived, they were greeted by a scene so grotesque it seemed ripped from the darkest corners of a nightmare. In the dimly lit room, lying motionless on the floor, was the decapitated body of a young child, likely no more than 2 years old. But the horror didn't end there. Upon closer examination, investigators discovered that parts of the child, a leg and chunks of flesh from the head, were mutilated and missing. As the interrogation began, the brothers showed no remorse. Instead, they casually pointed towards an old, rusty cooking pot sitting in the corner. The officers hesitated for a moment, then dared to look inside. What they saw made even the most hardened policemen recoil in disgust. The pot contained human flesh, simmering and cooking as if it were the most ordinary of meals. Without a second thought, the brothers were dragged into custody. But the nightmare was far from over. What drove them to commit such unspeakable acts? What horrors were hidden in the shadows of their minds? But this gruesome discovery wasn't the brothers' first brush with the macabre. This is a tale of madness, depravity, and cannibalism that shook an entire nation to its core. And their story begins in 2011. Very little is known about the two brothers, but according to some sources, Arif and Farman Ali resided in Darya Khan Town, Pakistan, with their sister who was believed to be mentally disabled. Both had been married at some point, but their wives eventually left them. The reason? Relentless domestic and physical abuse inflicted by the two brothers, driving their spouses away in fear. Arif and Farman worked as daily wage laborers, a brutal existence in Pakistan where income was unstable and unreliable. Some days they earned less than $3, while other times they returned home empty-handed, defeated by the harsh grind of poverty. Their meager earnings, a disabled sister to care for, a shattered family, and mounting domestic tensions began to wear away at their sanity. But beyond all their troubles, hunger became their darkest, most desperate concern. And in the shadows of despair, the brothers devised a chilling solution, one that would plunge them even deeper into madness and depravity. What they soon began to do would blur the lines between human suffering and monstrous survival. It all began after a 24-year-old woman, Saira Parveen, succumbed to throat cancer and was laid to rest by her grieving relatives. The next morning, some women from the family went to visit her grave. But to everyone's horror, Saira Parveen's grave was wide open, and her body was missing. Terrified and confused, the relatives informed local elders, and Ijaz Hussain, Saira's brother. They immediately contacted the authorities, and an investigation was swiftly launched. Footprints were discovered near the empty grave, and the police began to follow the trail. It led straight to the house of the Ali brothers. Inspector Fakhar Bhatti, along with his team, raided the house in the mid-morning. They found Arif sleeping in his room, while his father and disabled sister were present. Farman Ali, however, was nowhere to be found. The officers began a meticulous search of the premises, but found nothing until their attention was drawn to a locked door. It was Framen's room. Without hesitation, they broke the door down. An overpowering stench of cooking flesh and decay hit them instantly. In the middle of the dimly lit room stood a rusty cooking pot, half full of what appeared to be meat curry. Nearby lay a wooden chopping board, a butcher's axe, and a large kitchen knife. Bits of congealed fat clung to the tools, as though frozen in time. A colony of ants had already begun to swarm the food, and their trail led under the bed. There, concealed behind sacks of fertilizer, was a gunny bag. Inside it lay the dismembered body of Sarah Parveen. One of her legs had been severed below the knee, the other near the shin. The rest of her body remained intact, but the severed limbs had clearly been turned into the curry. A few days later, Farman Ali was traced and arrested. Both brothers were now behind bars, but what they confessed next sent shivers down the spines of the investigators. According to official statements, the brothers admitted to digging up at least 150 corpses from local graveyards and consuming human flesh over many years. During the interrogation, Farman Ali gave a disturbing and bizarre testimony. He claimed to have written certain verses of the Quran in reverse as part of a twisted ritual to cast a spell on their neighbors. For the spell to work, he said coldly, the brothers had to remain unclean and eat human flesh. Yet the horror didn't end there. Because in Pakistan there was no specific law against cannibalism. This legal loophole meant that despite the overwhelming evidence, the brothers could not be charged for eating human flesh. Instead, they were sentenced to a mere 2 years in prison for grave desecration. In 2013, after serving their brief term, the brothers were released, free to walk the earth once again. But their dark obsession hadn't faded. The insatiable hunger for human flesh was still burning within their twisted minds. And so, in 2014, the ultimate descent into depravity occurred. This time, their victim was a 2-year-old child. Just a few days after the arrest, their mentally disabled sister was found dead in a nearby canal. The evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses came forward, and their previous history of cannibalism was no longer hidden. Yet, in a mediocre turn, the Pakistani court sentenced them to just 12 years in prison. That means, in only a year or two, the Ali brothers will be free again. The most chilling question now looms. Will they resist the temptation of human flesh, or will the demonic urge manifest into something far more sinister? The nightmare is far from over.